Hey guys, Addict Cyclist here, back with another video. I apologize, it's been a few weeks. I've been battling some nasty colds and then a stomach bug, and just finally getting on my feet here and getting back to mountain bike racing. So want to talk about something that I've been kind of waiting to discuss, and that basically is suspension setup, right, for cross country. So I've been watching the UCI World Cup races that were in Brazil, and then over the weekend in Germany, and I've been paying a lot of close attention to bike setup, tires, but basically just kind of bike and tires. So a few things, right? We don't need to discuss this in depth. The first one is full suspension's faster everywhere, unless you're on, some smooth fire cut trail. All these pros are running full suspension. It's very rare you'll see a hardtail being used. So over the weekend, Chris Blevins, who wasn't feeling well, was riding his awesome Rainbow Epic hardtail. He ended up pulling out of the race because of a head cold in Germany. And then you had Enrique Avancini, who was rocking his Cannondale Scalpel hardtail. You can tell as the race progressed, he was getting beat up. All that energy and vibration, all that feedback, your body has to absorb that, right? And that basically turns into fatigue. And I apologize for the wind in the background. It's a nice day. Wanted to get some, video content here. Unfortunately, hopefully it's not coming back too much feedback through the mic. Anyway, so with that being said, you'll also see through the, I think it was Pink Bike put out some images of some tech, and Specialized was using this suspension measuring mechanism that basically helps measure which bike you should be riding, what pressures you should be running, what sag you should be running, what rebound you should be using, and I thought it was pretty interesting. I saw it on an Epic. So one quick note before we dive in here on travel and lockouts and so on and so forth. I did recognize that Jordan Saru, who placed 6th in Germany, just off the podium, was actually riding a team colored painted S-Works Epic Evo. He had a traditional rear shock with a lockout, was actually running a painted SID. It looked like 100 millimeters, and I couldn't tell if it was a SID SL Ultimate at the 100 millimeters or if it was actually just SID Ultimate at 120. But again, that also had a lockout. He was not running the brain suspension, and we'll talk about lockouts and the brain in a minute. But overall, you'll notice that cross country these days, everyone's really choosing to use full suspension. So let's talk about brain, let's talk about lockouts, let's talk about levers, yada, yada, yada. So first and foremost, obviously you can see, and you know by following my channel, that I love the Epic. One of the reasons is the brain. It's a love-hate thing. If you ride this bike fast, you'll love the brain. I mean, it's efficient 100% of the time. You don't have to worry about when locking it out, when not to lock it out. There's small bump compliance built into the suspension and the tune inside this front fork and inside obviously the rear brain. And basically it kind of takes away the guessing of, well, when am I locking out, or when should I open it, thinking about opening it and then not opening it when you should. So listen, it takes all that guesswork out. It's efficient 100% of the time, and you can see how clean the setup is. There's no rat's nest of cables here in the front. You got 2 cables, and those are the hydraulic lines for the brakes. So again, it's a little finicky. You do need to get to know it in relative to the trail system. So 9 out of 10 times I run it one click off a firm front and rear. Gives the bike a nice balance. It opens and closes, feels like a highly tuned machine. But there are places that do require a little bit more sensitivity, and again, the brain opens and closes automatically, right? It is not a true lockout, but in the fact that the brain fade, right, is basically just dictating, right, the breakthrough point in where the inertia valves open and close. So obviously there's 5 clicks in the front, 5 clicks in the back. I set mine right there. So basically what's happening is the bike is near locked out, very, very firm, if not locked out pedaling feel, almost like a rigid, but opens and closes seamlessly and stays open in rough sections. It doesn't just, take a hit and lock back up. No, it stays open. Obviously, if there's enough feedback in the trail to allow that inertia valve to sense that. So the fluid is obviously flowing in through the ports. But what's nice is that once it kind of gets smooth again, locks back up, and it's efficient. It's very efficient. Now, I've ridden bikes like the Canyon Lux, the Orbea Ois. I've had a Scott Spark. 650B was one of my first remote bikes, and it was great. But, you know, again, I kind of kept it in the middle mode, or if not open, just because I just didn't feel like messing around with it, personally. It does have its place, and obviously the pros that are not riding specialized epics have no choice but to use lockouts. So that's basically it. I know Fox has the live valve, and you'll only see that, I believe, on the giant Anthem that they just created for 2022. But, you know, again, lockouts have their place. They're basically the dominant option in the pros, because again, they're not running a suspension that's auto sensing like these inertia valves in this brain fork, and obviously in this brain shock. But again, I just feel like it takes away you focusing. At least for me, I like to just ride. I don't want to think about, oh, I need to lock it, or oh, I need to open it, or what if you were climbing, you locked it, and then you're dying, right? You're on the rivet, you know, and all of a sudden you start to drop in, and now it's locked. So again, this bike opens and closes. The misconception is, oh, it's a firm, stiff bike. Yeah, it is, if you don't really know what to put it on. But again, only you can decide that. I can't tell you what to use. I can just say probably firm it up and then start backing out the clicks until you get something that you like to ride relative to the trail system that you're on that day. It may take 1 or 2 rides at the trail system to really get a feel for it, but you know, obviously Nino does very well in his Scott Spark. You know, it's got the twin lock. Orbea always has the squid lock. DT Swiss runs a version for its shocks. So again, you know, it's definitely useful. It's definitely a great tool. To find that Jordan Saru is choosing that option over, you know, a brain, because he has the option of both. That's just personal preference for him, and he does well on it. But a couple things that I noticed in Germany and even in Brazil. So you got a guy like Nino, you know, who's probably one of the best, if not the best rider that exists outside of maybe Julian Absalon, who's just shy of his world tour record. You know, has always been running, you know, Scott bikes, basically, I think since he was contracted. So the twin lock is very great because that middle mode, you know, definitely firms up the rear, reduces travel, and it firms the rear up front and back. But, you know, when I see him climbing, you know, the bike is so big. It's a big, technically it looks like a trail bike. I don't even call it a cross-country bike. You know, it's a 120, you know, super wide, super chunky, and I feel bad for the guy. The guy's cranking up these climbs, and I just feel like he would do better with a narrower tire instead of the 2.4s, you know, and a lighter bike. That thing comes in at like 23 pounds when this bike equipped here, and most of the guys are running bikes that are 20, 21 pounds. You know, and at that pro level weight, you know, that extra pound, 2 pounds makes a difference. Again, he's getting it done. You can't fault the guy. But, you know, if you look at Tom Pidcock, you know, again, just was another whole league this weekend over in Germany. You know, basically put, you know, a little bit, I think like 30, 40 seconds on the rest of the field, or at least his case, Nino. But, you know, I just feel like a light, nimble bike is going to be key. You know, you can see that Nino definitely excels on the downhill. If you watch the Germany race, you can see him the most confident and probably the fastest descending. But unfortunately, you know, these racers are one in the climbs. So having a light bike, a nimble bike is great, and probably recommended. Now, the hardtail obviously is a great efficient climber, but you are getting all that feedback the entire race. And I just feel like full suspension is the way to go. And obviously the pros and the data show that. So in terms of efficiency, yeah, you know, the hardtail in terms of putting down power is going to win 100% of the time, but you lose momentum over routes. You know, you have to be more selective on line choice, and you know, I just think that full suspension is the way to go, especially if you have the option for lockouts and, you know, a bike like this where it does all the thinking for you. No pun intended here with the brain. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of give some feedback. You know, these last 2 races, the first 2 races of the season were really great. It was very interesting to see some of the bike choices. You know, I'm enjoying the racing and enjoying the equipment and tech, and, you know, hope you're enjoying the same. So if you have any feedback on the brain, or why you choose lockouts over the brain, or if you don't choose lockouts at all, I just feel like you know, at the pro level, having the most efficient bike as possible, kind of like the Epic, you know, where it's basically call it a hardtail light, a hardtail with a blow off. I mean, you can't get any more efficient than that. But again, if you ride this bike, you know, please feel free to leave some comments here why you chose the Epic maybe over the Evo, or the Evo over the Epic, or any bike over the Epic. So yep, that's it. Please consider subscribing. Appreciate the support, feedback, and be well.